All right. Welcome back to me. I didn't get much of a break in between those sessions there, but I'm extremely glad and very excited for this upcoming panel. I'm going to set a little bit of context first and then welcome our wonderful panelists. I think we've talked a little bit about during the course of this day, during the planetary health panel as well as the previous panel, of course, on the need for growth in the alternative seafood landscape. The health and vitality of our oceans is absolutely critical to the future of our planet. That sounds intuitively true, but it is especially under threat at this stage. Rising consumption of seafood presents several challenges to that vitality. And I'm gonna pause there and just introduce our panelists because I'd like to let you know about all of the incredible work that's ongoing currently within the alternative seafood landscape, and in particular, discuss an incredibly exciting project that GFI's global teams are working on, which promises to be a milestone for that entire industry. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce firstly Jen Lamy. Jen manages the expansion of GFI's Sustainable Seafood Initiative, which is a global initiative across all of our partner organizations, including India, to ensure that it proceeds strategically and with the input and involvement of key stakeholders. Her academic background is in environmental economics and sustainable food systems, and she's most recently worked on federal climate policy advocacy. Jen holds a master's in environmental management from Duke University's Nicholas School of the Environment and a bachelor's in economics and environmental studies from Wellesley College. Welcome, Jen. All right, and then we have Dr. Paolo Bray. Dr. Paolo has been engaged for the last 30 years in protecting endangered species and in environmental conservation activities. We're absolutely delighted to have him with us. He's currently Director of International Programs for the Dolphin Safe Project, Earth Island Institute, and is founder and director of World Sustainability Organization, including its Friend of the Sea and Friend of the Earth programs. Over the last 30 years of experience in conservation, he has helped start and develop several certification projects. And he's really been pivotal to our work in this space over the last couple of months. So thank you, Dr. Paolo, for joining us. All right, we may have lost connection to Dr. Bray. Are you there? Can you hear me? I think you may be on mute. Your audio isn't on. Sorry, I can't hear you, Dr. Bray. Could you check on your audio? Could you check on your audio again if it's working? Can you hear me now? Okay, so while we get that fixed, I'm just going to go ahead and ask a question to Jen. Jen, firstly, about our Sustainable Seafood Initiative across borders, across GFI's international network. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and about the problem I just mentioned, about the problem of sustainable oceans? Why is alternative seafood important in the first place? And feel free to share slides if you'd like.
Yeah, so we launched the Sustainable Seafood Initiative because, we see alternative seafood as, and that includes plant-based, fermentation-derived, and cultivated seafood, as really a key way to meet growing global demand for seafood. So right now we're on track to, see probably about a 30% increase in demand for fish and shellfish globally within about the next 10 years relative to 10 years ago. So we're expecting a big supply gap in meeting that. And our current two major production systems, so wild capture fishing and aquaculture, have really faced a lot of challenges in the effort to meet that demand. So wild capture fishing faces, the really obvious challenge of fishery depletion. We have about 7% of fisheries estimated right now to be underfished, and about a third are already sort of projected as overfished. So we've pretty much hit our limit in terms of what number of fish we can take out of the sea. And in addition to that limit, we have emissions from fuel use on fishing vessels, which are continuously increasing. We have bycatch, which is by some estimates about 40% of all catches worldwide. Discarded fishing gear is a serious source of plastic pollution in the ocean. And then just, destructive fishing practices really damaging ocean ecosystems directly. So aquaculture has stepped in to try and meet some of that demand, but it has come with its own challenges. Anytime that you raise animals in a confined amount of space, you're going to run into challenges of health, pollution, efficiency, animal welfare, of course. in many cases, we're seeing, antibiotic use in aquaculture, animal waste polluting surrounding water, wild caught fish being used for feed, high value or high levels of disease spreading through facilities, and many other concerns. And of course, there are players in the aquaculture industry trying to improve the system and doing a really good job, but the vast majority of production is kind of inherently flawed just by nature of the design. So in order to sort of foster the growth of the alternative seafood industry, we can, the faster we do that, the faster we can alleviate some of those concerns and meet growing global demand for seafood in a way that's really sustainable, healthy, and just. And that's what we're doing with the Sustainable Seafood Initiative. We are, as Varun mentioned, a global and cross-functional team working to accelerate the development and the commercialization of alternative seafood of all types. So we are engaging with scientists, companies, investors, policymakers, really around the world to make sure that everyone interested in this industry has the resources they need. So we're keeping, this very open access approach, as GFI does with all of our work, and are funding key research directly, connecting collaborators to each other, creating open access databases and tools, and really working with nonprofit organizations like World Sustainability Organization to empower everyone interested in sustainable seafood to play a role in advancing this key industry.
Thank you, Jen. And I can't stress how much alternative seafood is neglected within the global, even within the global alternative protein landscape. And that's why we're very excited to launch this project today. Dr. Paulo, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, wonderful.
Okay, wonderful. Yes, the audio seems to be jumping a little bit. I don't know why. For the rest of the time, the connection was good.
All right, wonderful. So, thank you so much for joining us. I want to ask you a question about the pioneering work you've done. WSO, Friend of the Sea and Friend of the Earth, your certification programs in both terrestrial and marine agriculture have been working for a very long time. Would you please tell us a little bit about the history of the organization and the kinds of work you already do within the seafood sphere?
Yes, sure. Thank you. And I don't know if you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, this is good. Thank you.
Yes. Well, we started getting involved in certification of lower impact food, in particular seafood, 30 years ago, at the time when sustainability was not even used as a word. And these campaigns were focused on iconic species. And I started working 30 years ago on the Dolphin Safe Tuna project of the Earth Island Institute, an NGO based in California, which basically certified the tuna caught without harming dolphins. By means of this project, we managed to save millions of dolphins from getting killed in the tuna industry, and to raise awareness about the potential impact of fisheries on the marine habitat. Over the years, more information was made available, as Dr. Lamy mentioned, about overexploitation of seafood resources, and companies started to become more aware. And in 2008, on the wave of the good results of the Dolphin Safe, we launched the Friend of the Sea certification, which is certifying products from sustainable fisheries and aquaculture. So it's the only one which, with the same seal of approval, can certify both origins. And nowadays, aquaculture represents approximately 50% of seafood in the market. And the audits are carried out by independent certification bodies, which are recognized by the national accreditation bodies. So this makes really a third-party certification which consumers can trust and rely, and be transparent, independent, and carried out in a professional way. Over 1,000 companies in more than 70 countries have Friend of the Sea certified products. And we can say that Friend of the Sea contributed to the sustainable seafood movement and raising this awareness. In 2018, we launched a parallel project, which is Friend of the Earth, which certifies products from sustainable agriculture and farming. And it is also a third-party certification. And the awareness and interest is growing fast. And currently, we have products certified in almost all continents, from coffee to quinoa, rice, and wine, oil, fruits, and also dairy products, meat and eggs. And both projects, Friend of the Sea and Friend of the Earth, contribute about 20% of their budget to conservation projects and campaigns. So we are actually also like an active NGO in these terms.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paolo. And I want to stay with you to ask you about the incredibly exciting launch today. Could you let the audience know what we're launching with the plant-based seafood standards, and why you were interested in certifying plant-based seafood and how the certifications will work?
Yes, basically the two certifications, Friend of the Sea and Friend of the Earth, obviously have different requirements for certification of sustainability. For example, Friend of the Sea certification for fisheries looks at the impact of the fishing activity on the marine habitat. So the stock which is target of the fishery must not be considered overexploited according to the regional fishery bodies. The fishing method must be selective. It should not impact the seabed. It should not bycatch endangered species. And there's also social accountability requirements, and in aquaculture, fish welfare requirements. And the Friend of the Earth certification has obviously different standards which look at the impact of the development of the agricultural site on the previous natural habitat, the agriculture management methodology, which needs to be somehow similar to the integrated pest management measures and practices. And then there's also requirements related to water, energy, waste management, efficiency, and the social accountability. So because it is in the World Sustainability Organization DNA and mission to promote more sustainable products, it came natural to introduce a golden level, a premium level certification for plant-based seafood to highlight to consumers and to companies at B2B level those products which originate from plants which are farmed in a sustainable way and which can provide a lower impact alternative to seafood, to the, let's say, traditional seafood out there in the market. And so WSO, the World Sustainability Organization, is the only organization in the world who can, by means of the Friend of the Earth requirements for sustainable agricultural practices, audit and verify the sustainability of the plant ingredients in the plant-based seafood products, and then allow the producers to highlight their engagement to protect the marine habitat by means of the Friend of the Sea logo, the Friend of the Sea label. So this is how we are now working, and it is for us very important and very useful to collaborate with GFI and try to pass this message, highlight this opportunity, one of the several opportunities for their members, for its members, for companies producing plant-based seafood, to highlight in a third-party way, by means of a third-party audit and verification, the sustainability engagement of these products and producers.
That's totally wonderful, and obviously an incredibly exciting development for the majority of the industry. So what you said was gold label certifications for plant-based seafood and plant-based meat from the Friend of the Earth side, and of course plant-based omega-3s as well. Really, really interesting. Jen, I want to go back to you and talk about why it's such a milestone for the industry. What does this mean for alternative seafood at large, and what will it mean for an individual company during their life cycle as well?
Yeah, so these certifications are really key to, matching consumers who are interested in sustainability to alternative seafood, and to also expanding distribution in both retail and food service. So we know consumers seem to be increasingly interested in buying sustainable seafood, and they rely on certifying organizations and also, ranking programs to really give them the information they need to make those purchasing decisions. And so this certification will help them understand that, plant-based seafood has a role in the sustainable seafood world more broadly. At the same time, retailers and restaurants are increasingly relying on sustainability certifications to make seafood purchasing decisions. So many retailers have, published goals related to the proportion of seafood that they will sell that is certified sustainable. So for example, in the US, Walmart is the largest grocery retailer, and they have a sustainable seafood policy that says that more than 90% of the seafood that they sell has to be certified by a few specific organizations. And so, providing this certification pathway for plant-based seafood helps those companies establish their own role in advancing, retailers' progress towards public sustainability goals, which is really exciting. In addition, restaurants are increasingly choosing to purchase and serve certified sustainable seafood, and often buyers for restaurants will really only look at options that meet those sustainability requirements. So earning the Friend of the Sea logo will get plant-based companies really in front of those key decision makers, and help to get more of these products into food service and in front of consumers in all of these different settings. So you could imagine, a new plant-based seafood company that meets the Friend of the Earth standards, and therefore earns the Friend of the Sea label as a plant-based seafood company. And they can put that logo on packaging in retail that consumers will notice. And a retailer who's looking to purchase sustainable seafood for their stores will notice that new plant-based company. And then restaurants that are going right to the certifier's website to look for the kinds of companies that they want to be serving will notice the company as well. So I think this program is a massive opportunity for the, at this point, pretty nascent plant-based seafood industry to expand both its visibility and its impact. And certifications like this can really help point environmentally conscious consumers to new sustainable foods that they might not otherwise consider. And then obviously inform purchasing decisions for some of these key retailers and restaurants along the way. So I think we'll really see plant-based seafood establishing itself as a really core solution in the quest for more sustainable seafood in general.
Yeah, truly wonderful. And it's interesting to note, we do have a lot of consumer research coming out soon about perceptions of seafood and then also alternative seafood. But this is a special consideration for seafood specifically, right? Because seafood has perceptions of sustainability and a health halo such that consumers who are buying seafood are looking for a certification label, perhaps not as much as they are on the meat side. So, that's something that's really important. And I think WSO, that legitimacy is going to be fantastic with respect to giving a market parity or a perception parity to alternative seafood moving forward. So before we move on to questions from the audience, I want to get another round of questions into both of you. What does the future of alternative seafood hold? What does an abundant supply of alternative seafood in 2025 or 2030 look like? Dr. Paulo, could you go first?
Yes, well, the demand for traditional seafood will continue to grow in general, and it's projected to grow about 1 to 1.5% every year for the next decade. However, it is well known that there is no more growth in terms of fisheries catches, because it reached a maximum of about 100 million metric tons in year 2000 and didn't go farther, because most of the stocks are fully exploited or overexploited. And actually, aquaculture growth, which has been very fast in the past decades, is now slowing down because, of course, there are limits to its growth, especially in Europe, in the US, even though new technologies give hope to further improvements. So there is obviously space for growth in the plant-based seafood arena. and which, however, it is still relatively young and small in terms of percentage in the market. From my data, the plant-based meat production is about 1% of the total. I hope Dr. Lamy will confirm this. And the seafood itself is 1% of the meat, of the plant-based meat production. But this should not, of course, should be even a motivation, in the future to grow very fast. And in fact, in the year 2020, with also COVID somehow changing the perspective of some of the consumers, there's been a peak in consumption of plant-based meat and food in general, which more than doubled apparently, according to some studies, which tell us that it has grown about 148% in the past months. So the consumer demand is definitely going to grow fast. And what is more impressive and will further boost this growth, I think, paradoxically, but positively, is that even the major seafood producers themselves have somehow jumped into the plant-based seafood arena, and they are pushing a lot. Even in recent days and months, we see it here, at least in Europe, with TV marketing initiatives which highlight the sustainability of these alternative dishes and products. And so definitely this will impact consumers' awareness a lot. And it is likely that we are going to see a huge change in consumption trends. And the World Sustainability Organization role is to raise awareness both at B2B as well as B2C level, as we somehow did and contributed 30 years ago with the Dolphin Safe, and more recently with Friend of the Sea and Friend of the Earth. And we are really glad to be partners with GFI. And Mr. Amod Salgaonkar is our man responsible for this project. So anybody interested could be in contact with him. And he's from India, and he's a member of the WSO advisory board.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much to Amod for helping to build this partnership. If anyone would like to reach out to him, you can get in touch with us, or many of you may already know him. Jen, really the same question. What does a thriving market or a thriving supply of alternative seafood look like in 2025 or 2030? And particularly, I think we've discussed that Asia is so undercapitalized in this area. There's so much opportunity. What does that look like within Asia broadly?
Yeah, I think the point about the conventional industry getting involved is a really important one. And I think that will be particularly big in the entire Asia region. I really think we're going to see continued acceleration of this industry's growth in the next 5 and 10 and 15 years. I think we'll start to see more and more investment and innovation in the space. I think, it's only a matter of time before these major incumbent seafood manufacturers around the world see more opportunities for themselves in this space. And yes, a lot of them are already jumping in, which is really exciting. But I think just as the excitement about the space and as the new products really continue to come onto the market, we'll see these companies needing to really get involved in order to keep up with shifting consumer demand and to take advantage of what is really a more efficient supply and distribution chain that's afforded by alternative seafood. So I imagine we'll see movement like we've seen in terrestrial plant-based meat, where a lot of the big players have either gotten into space through investments or rolling out their own plant-based products. And I think that in the next 5 years or so, we'll see movement probably in more of the blended protein space with where you'll get like a can of tuna or a fish stick that is maybe half conventional seafood, and we'll continue to see movement in that direction as companies start to explore this space all over the world. In the longer term, I think looking 10 years out and further, the biggest shift I think we'll see is that I sort of had this vision of alternative seafood being seen as the obvious sustainable seafood solution. So, that feature includes governments all over the world putting funding into research in this space. As I mentioned, companies shifting, but at that point, really shifting their core focus from conventional to alternative seafood, and consumers and organizations who care about the ocean really working directly on expanding this industry. And that, of course, includes, every single organization that's working on sustainable seafood certifications, really taking a good look at alternative seafood and incorporating it into the category, incorporating that category into their definitions of sustainable seafood, which is why I'm so excited to see Friend of the Sea really ahead of the game and leading that shift.
Yeah, I have no doubt that with WSO Friend of the Sea's support, the pioneering role that you're playing now, as you did with previous certifications, this is going to be the beginning of a sort of wave in this space. And I also wanted to highlight, Jen, that what you said about the transitions and the diversification of seafood supply, a lot of it will come from incumbent seafood players as well. People who are already involved in the seafood supply chain, who already have conventional seafood as their core business. So that's really exciting, and it presents a huge opportunity. And if there are any entrepreneurs, any business folks from the seafood space who'd like to reach out to us to think about how you might look at capitalizing on this new opportunity, we'd love to talk to you. I want to throw it open now to questions from the audience. We're going to extend the time from 7:30 to maybe 7:35. That's India time. Would you like to switch on the Slido now, please? Thank you. Excuse me. Okay. How do you see these seafood standards being perceived by existing industry? And why should they, I would rephrase this to why should traditional or conventional seafood industry work on alternative seafood? Paolo, would you like to go first? You're on mute. You need to unmute yourself. You just need to unmute yourself on the Zoom screen. Yeah.
Here I am.
Yeah.
Can you just please repeat the question, because I was trying to interpret it and reading it, but.
Yeah, I think the question was related to how does the conventional seafood industry perceive these sorts of standards, and why should they get involved as well in alternative seafood?
Well, the point is that you can farm fish in a sustainable way. And we have verified this, and we do verify this by the Friend of the Sea normal standard. And there is space for this type of production, and this needs to continue, because obviously we cannot dream, at least in the next few years and decade, to be able to compensate all demand for seafood for this. It's a shift in trends in food tradition that we need to allow, and this will take some time, at least with the reduction in consumption of animal proteins, as suggested also by several let's say scientists and diets, and so we have to take hand in hand the consumers, the companies, to move into this direction. And Friend of the Sea will work as a catalyst to help this change. And we have seen that in the most let's say enlightened or marketing aware companies have already moved in that direction, from proposing to consumers also alternative seafood. The seafood companies themselves are doing this, and some of the tuna, some of the frozen seafood companies are doing this. So obviously this means that it's the right direction, and those seafood companies which still haven't moved in this direction will be more and more aware. Some of them, of course, might somehow oppose to this trend, but it would be the wrong move, because we need to, and the industry needs to meet the demand. And if the demand changes over the years for good reasons, then it needs to go that way.
Thank you. And I'd like to combine a couple of questions now into one. So they all relate to how the certifications work. And I'm sure all the details will be available on the website, but let's just talk about that for a second, Paolo. I think you don't have to worry what's on the screen here because I'm combining a few into one. Does the certification verify that only plant ingredients are used and non-animal proteins? And also, do they differ for producers versus traders versus other people? How does it work?
Well, of course, as part of the verification, the certification will verify also that no animal proteins are used in the process, and it will imply a verification of all the agricultural ingredients, all the plant-based ingredients, in terms of the way that they have been produced at agricultural level. So as I mentioned before, as I explained before, going through the requirements, looking at the impact of the agricultural site on the previous existing natural habitat, making sure that any wild flora and fauna existing occurring on the site is protected, in particular endangered species, and that the agricultural practices are sustainable. So our requirements are very similar to those of integrated pest management and waste energy management, social accountability, which is becoming very important. So one should not certify a product as friend of the earth if it is produced in a way that it does not take into consideration workers' rights and human rights in general. So all this is verified by means of an on-site audit. At COVID time, we are authorized by the national accreditation bodies to carry out this through a sophisticated remote on-site audit, which is video recording the whole audit and putting it on a blockchain. So once the audit is finalized, if there are no non-conformities, then the company and the product can be certified, and then there are surveillances every year, and the whole process is then itself verified by the national accreditation bodies.
Thank you. Yeah, so we already took all of these questions. I want to just ask Jen a question that I asked earlier as well. What would it look like for an individual plant-based seafood entrepreneur to go through this process, and how would it benefit them along their journey? I know you mentioned that consumers are looking to shop like this, and retailers, maybe food service folks are also purchasing product now on this basis. But what would it look like for someone who's entering this system as a plant-based entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I think, the big benefit here is the name recognition of Friend of the Sea, and seeing that logo, and, consumers all over the world know what that logo looks like. So as a company coming into this space and launching a plant-based product and going through the certification process as described, can then, use that logo on their products and have, a consumer who's browsing for a seafood product, see something that matches their expectations and will hopefully spark interest among those who maybe aren't coming specifically to the shelf for that exact product. And that is certainly true on the retail and food service side as well. I think we'll see, pretty globally more interest in the space as these plant-based products are, being lumped into the general category of sustainable seafood. And so an individual company can then have the logo on their website, on their product. They can have their company's name then listed on the Friend of the Sea website. So if a buyer is going through there looking to see what companies are doing a really good job in this space and who do they want to have in their store, who do they want to be supporting, that they'll really have that kind of intro directly to the buyer.
Thank you very much, Jen. And I'm going to give Dr. Paolo the last word here before we sign off for the day. Dr. Paolo, could you tell me what are you looking for in terms of partnerships and people to take this forward over the next couple of years?
Well, the sector is growing in terms of the number of companies involved. And we are planning to also, we are proposing the certification also to the plant-based meat sector, and not only, but also to the plant-based omega-3 production, because we are very strong in certification of sustainability in the omega-3 field. And more generally, this could be spread to other similar approaches which deserve to be highlighted and promoted at the golden level, let's say. So in this process, of course, collaboration with organizations like GFI, still maintaining total independence in our own activities, really help, because they can provide echo and allow us to get a bit closer and gain somehow more confidence from the associated members. And so we are planning to activate similarly also in the other fields. In some cases, we already have good collaboration with other organizations which represents, for example, the omega-3 or the fish meal and fish oil arena. And so this is important, but it's also important to work together at government level with the other institutions and with the scientific institutions in the different countries. And we think that India can surely play a very important strategic role also for its tradition in the way that it gives preference also to vegetable production in its traditional diet, in its basic diet. So it definitely also is an important country where to start and launch today, for example, this initiative, because also of its major role in agriculture and seafood production, with all its, let's say, pros and cons, potential impacts, and space for improvement. So it has been very important for us to be here today, and specifically, even though online, but through an India-based organization. Thank you.
Dr. Paolo Bray, World Sustainability Organization and Friend of the Sea, Jen Lamy, GFI Sustainable Seafood Initiative. Thank you so much for being at the Smart Protein Summit. We really appreciate your time in launching this milestone for the industry. To all the audience, thank you for staying with us through the end of this day. We will see you at the beginning of day 5, the final day of the summit. We're nearly there. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Paolo.
Thank you.
Thank you.